Simple time rhythm. Simple time rhythm means that each pulse in the music is felt in whole beats. And simple time rhythms are divided into 4 categories. Number 1, simple duple, which means there are 2 pulses in a bar. Number 2, simple triple, which means there are 3 pulses in a bar. Number 3, simple quadruple, which means there are 4 pulses in a bar. And number 4, which we can call other, which has more than 4 pulses in a bar. To best get our heads around simple time patterns, we need to look at the options that are most commonly used. But before we do this, we need to be introduced to the contenders, the rhythmic values that we will be using in our simple time rhythms. This is the note tree. At the top of our tree we have a semibreve or a whole note, which is worth 4 beats. At the next stage down we have a minim or a half note, which is worth 2 beats. The next stage down we have a crotchet or a quarter note, which is worth 1 beat. The next stage down is a quaver or an eighth note, which is worth half a beat. And the next stage down, and our final level that we are going to cover in this video, is the semiquaver or a 16th note. And each one of these is worth a quarter of a beat. Straight rhythms. These are rhythmic patterns that are taken straight from the note tree which we discussed in the previous slide. You can see here, a semibreve or a whole note sounds on the first beat and sustains or holds over the following 3 beats to create a total of 4 beats in length. A minim or a half note sounds on the first beat and sustain or holds over the following beat to create a total of 2 beats in length. A crotchet or quarter note sounds on each beat and sustains for the full length of the beat or pulse to create a total of 1 beat in length. A quaver or eighth note sounds on the first beat and halfway to the next beat, creating a rhythm that places 2 notes evenly spaced over a beat or pulse. Each quaver, therefore, is half a beat in length. The counting for the rhythm has been placed beneath the quavers, 1 and. You can see there are 2 different versions of the quavers. The top image has the quavers with tails drawn individually, but having 2 quavers next to each other, we can actually bracket them together with a single line across the top called a beam. 1 beam is equivalent to 1 tail. So 2 notes joined together with a single beam indicate that those notes are quavers. A semiquaver or 16th note sounds on the first beat and on each quarter of the beat on a way to the next beat, creating a rhythm that places 4 notes evenly spaced over the beat or pulse. Each semiquaver, therefore, is 1/4 beat in length. The counting for the rhythm has been placed beneath the semiquavers, 1, E, and A. And you can see there are 2 different versions of how these semiquavers can be presented. On the top, you have 4 semiquavers. Each semiquaver has 2 tails placed next to each other. But when we have semiquavers sitting next to each other, we can join them together with beams across the top. And you can see that 4 semiquavers joined together have 2 beams joining them all together. Each beam represents a tail. 2 beams is equal to 2 tails, which is the identifying factor for semiquavers. Straight rhythmic options, and this is what they sound like. The semibreve, the minim, the crotchet, two quavers, 4 semiquavers. Mixed rhythms. These are rhythmic patterns that mix quavers and semiquavers together to create one-beat patterns, and they are used to create variation in rhythmic patterns to keep the music interesting. If we take 4 straight semiquavers and replace 2 of the group with a quaver, we end up with our mixed rhythmic patterns. Here, we've got 4 straight semiquavers. If we group the first 2 semiquavers together and replace that with a quaver, we end up with this pattern, and you can see the counting beneath, 1 and a. The E is highlighted yellow because the quaver sustains out over where that second semiquaver would have traditionally been. For our second group, we start again with our straight 4 semiquavers. This time we are going to replace the last 2 semiquavers in the group with a quaver, and we end up with this pattern. And the counting is 1 E and. You can see the A is highlighted in yellow because the final quaver sustains out over the A or the 4th semiquaver. The third combination, we start once again with our 4 semiquavers. This time we're going to replace the 2 semiquavers in the middle with a quaver, and we end up with this pattern. The counting is 1 E A, and you can see that the and is highlighted in yellow because the quaver placed on the E sustains out over the and where that semiquaver would be traditionally. So our mixed rhythmic options are 1 and a, 1 E and, 1 E a. Dotted rhythms. What are dots on rhythms? Dots placed next to the notes add half of that note's value to its overall sustain, and they are used to lengthen the value of standard rhythms. So, if we take a semibreve and a minim being half the length of a semibreve, we can get a note that is 6 beats in length, and we can achieve that by putting a dot next to the semibreve. If we take a minim or a half note and add a crotchet or a quarter note, which is half of a minim, we join them together to get a 3-beat note, and that is symbolized by a dotted minim. If we take a crotchet and a quaver being half the value of a crotchet, and join them together, we end up with a note that's 1.5 beats in length, and we can symbolize that with a dotted crotchet. And finally, if we take a quaver and a semiquaver being half the value of a quaver, and join them together, we end up with a note that's 3/4 of a beat in length, and we symbolize that with a dotted quaver. Once again, if we take our 4 straight semiquavers and replace 3 of the group with a dotted quaver, we can end up with our dotted mixed rhythmic patterns. So for example, we have our 4 semiquavers. We are going to group the first 3 semiquavers together and replace that with a dotted quaver. So our rhythm now looks like this. The counting would be 1 a. You can see the E and the and of our traditional semiquaver group are highlighted in yellow. That's because the dotted quaver sustains out over the first 3 semiquavers. You can also notice that they have been joined together with beams. One single beam joins the dotted quaver to the semiquaver, and then we have a little second beam attached to the second note to identify that as a semiquaver. Another option, we once again start with our 4 semiquavers. This time we are going to group our last 3 semiquavers together to create this pattern, and the counting would be 1 E. You can see that the and are both highlighted in yellow. That's because the dotted quaver on the E sustains out over those 3 final semiquavers in our group. So our dotted rhythmic options are, we have a dotted semi-breve that goes for 6 beats. A dotted minim, which goes for 3 beats. A dotted crotchet, which goes for 1.5 beats. Our first dotted mixed rhythm, 1E. And our second dotted mixed rhythm, 1A. Triplets. What are triplets? Triplets are where you put 3 notes in the space of 2, and there are 2 commonly used triplets that we will cover in this section of the video. 2 crotchets equals 1 minim, but if we put 3 crotchets bracketed together with a 3, they become a crotchet triplet, which means that the 3 crotchets are slightly less in value to make them worth 2 beats or a minim. 2 quavers equals 1 crotchet traditionally, but if we put 3 quavers bracketed together with a 3, they become a quaver triplet, which means that the 3 quavers are slightly less in value to make them worth 1 beat or a crotchet. Because the value of the notes are slightly less than their straight counterparts, we cannot use the counting method that we have used thus far. Instead, when we are dealing with triplets, we use the words pineapple, which is a word that gives 3 perfectly spaced syllables that represents triplets over pulses in music. So, a crotchet triplet would have the word pineapple spread evenly over 2 beats or pulses. Pineapple, pineapple, ba, 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 ba. And a quaver triplet would have the word pineapple spread evenly over 1 beat or pulse. Pineapple, 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 ba, 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 ba. So, our simple time rhythms. We've got our first options, which are our straight rhythms. We have our mixed rhythmic options. We have our dotted rhythmic options. And we have our mixed dotted rhythms. And finally, we have our triplets. These are the rhythmic patterns that are very commonly used in simple time rhythmic patterns in the VCE and in our rhythmic dictation questions. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful.